The one thing that your experience has in common with other people that I've interviewed personally is that when they have this more, I'm going to call it a hellish experience because that was the word that you used for it in the beginning. When they got to this certain point and they said, I don't believe in this, is there something more? Or called on God or called on Jesus, they were immediately taken out of it and shown a heavenly realm. But for you, it was almost like you called on yourself and your own inner strength, and boom, were able to overcome because you stood up and said, fine, you're going to do it, come and get me because I'm coming back stronger. And then you're out of it and you're awake. So it's almost like you bested that situation, which is very similar to other NDEs that have had those experiences. You want to speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, I would say you never do anything completely by yourself.
My guest today is Jason Dennen, who had a near death experience as a result of a skydiving accident gone terribly wrong. And it actually moved his heart inside his chest. And yet, after all of that, he says that this is the very best thing that has ever happened to him. So you can imagine how excited I am to talk to him today. So, Jason, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Well, this is going to be a very interesting conversation. I think you might be confirming the reason why I've decided never to sky jump, to skydive. So I'm
Don't let me
curious
scare you
before,
off.
well, before we even get into all those other things, I'm going to ask you a question. After you had that experience, did you ever jump out of an airplane again?
Well, no, because essentially my mom, and we would get into this later, but she came up to my bed in the hospital before I even could move, and she said, "Can you promise me one thing, not to jump out of an airplane again?" And I had terrible guilt from putting my family through the accident, so I said, "You know what? There's other things I can do. I've learned enough, and it's an amazing learning experience from skydiving." And I told her, I was like, "No, I won't jump. I can do other things." So
But
no, I haven't jumped
if
in.
she didn't have that parameter, would you do it again?
I don't know, possibly. I don't think there's anything preventing or holding me back, but I think there's lots of other things to explore. So it's not like, because I was a skydiver for a couple of years, it wasn't. Probably different if you're a lifelong skydiver or you're an instructor, and that's how you make your living and things like that. It was for me, it was more like exploration and personal growth, and I knew there was other things to do besides that. So if I didn't promise, would I jump again? Maybe. I don't. Yeah, probably. Maybe a couple times. Because it would be interesting to see what it felt like afterwards, and it would be interesting really to be at the door of the plane when it's open and you're about to jump, because that's really when you're going to get. I would get nervous. Would you relive some of the things that had happened in the skydiving accident right when you're about to jump out and in free fall, and then when your parachute's open and I'm about to land? How would affect me? Maybe I would completely repress what happened during the accident and it wouldn't affect me, or maybe it would just like open up and I would remember everything and be in a state of PTSD. So yeah, it would be hard to tell.
Fair enough. Oh, that's interesting. Well, so before you had this accident, what was your life like?
Well, I mean, shortly before the accident, so I work in the financial industry, and a few years earlier, before the accident, I got a new job, and I was working a crazy amount of hours, like 12 to 14 hours a day, and a lot of times 6 days a week, nonstop deadlines, and so I was jumping out of the plane on the weekends when I could, and it was kind of like an escape because one of the things with skydiving is you're really in the moment. So I would say when I was at the airport, nothing else existed. There was no future, there was no past, there was just right now. Especially when you're actually out of the plane and in free fall. But even when I was there, I was kind of isolating myself from all that work, and it was really an escape. But yeah, it was I was going through a tough time because I was just working so many hours, and I didn't expect that was the promotion at work was going to lead to that. And I would say sometimes you find out that your what you think is your best quality is also your worst quality at the same exact time. Because I was one of those people that I could put my head down and really get through anything, and that was my attitude. Because that kind of carries over from climbing mountains and going through, periods where you weren't sure you were going to survive, or you're really, in some bad situations. things like racing triathlons where you're going through those long distance ones where you're out there 12 or 13 hours and you go through your ups and downs and you go through really hard times and you have to kind of press through that to get to the other side and finish the race. So it served me in a good way in those things, but the bad side is you can get so one-mindedly focused, which I that's my personality. I get super focused on things, but if you get so focused that it takes you away from all the things that you think are important in your life that you really value, and you're not, that if someone asked you what are the most important things, you would say it, but you're not at that moment or in that time period acting on that and not honoring those things, that one-minded obsessiveness can take you in a really bad place. And I think recognizing that as in your character and trying to control that is ultimately what you need to do, because you could use it for in a good way, but it can also carry you into places you don't want to be. And knowing it can happen can also allow you to kind of stop that when it's taking you in that bad place, because working all those hours wasn't making me happy. And I wasn't spending time with family and friends and loved ones. And I had a lot of things I wanted to accomplish outside of work, like volunteering in a hospital and things like that. And during that time period, I was missing family events and not volunteering, and I felt kind of empty, and not that I wasn't doing anything else besides work, and kind of led me down that path that I really wasn't happy. And then that kind of led up to the accident. Um, so
Okay, so why don't you tell us what happened in this skydiving accident?
Sure. So I had been skydiving at this point for a couple of years, so a couple hundred jumps under my belt. So I guess you would call me experienced jumpers. There's people with thousands of jumps, but so it was a Saturday, beautiful day. I had gone for a trail run that day, that morning, got packed up, got all my skydiving gear, headed to the airport for a couple jumps. And this was the third jump of the day when this accident happened. So first two jumps went off without a hitch, normal day. Third jump, my parachute's opened above me and I'm coming in for a landing, and I'm about 150 feet off the ground at this point, and I'm about to land at a grass field that I landed in on hundreds of times before. So as I'm coming in, and when you're in a parachute, I think depending on what your experience is with parachutes, a lot of people think of the World War II round parachutes where you're coming kind of straight down and just the wind is pushing you around. And then modern parachutes you're flying 20 to 25 miles an hour ahead as you're landing. So unless the wind's blowing against you, then it could be a little bit slower, or if it's at your rear, it could be faster, but around 20, 25 miles an hour. So I'm coming in for a landing, 150 feet off the ground, and then huge wind comes off the mountains and picks me up and pushes me violently forward. So I went from a place where I was like, okay, I'm landing on this grass field, not it's like I've landed, lots of times before, so no big deal. It's just routine. And then that wind hits me and it speeds me up quite a bit, and it kind of picked me up and like threw me. So it was kind of shook me up when I got hit by it. Never gotten hit by a wind that hard under the parachute before. And so I get hit and I speed up. And then in front of me, after the grass, is a cattle fence. So it's like a three wired fence, no barbs, but so it's like barbed wire fence without the barbs. And then about 10 feet behind that is an airplane hangar, which is about 20 feet high or so. And there's a row of them. So there's ones to the right and ones to the left. And they're pretty wide. So I don't know, 50, 100 feet wide, something like that. So when I get hit and I go, okay, I increased my speed. So it's harder to really determine how far forward I'm going to wind up going when I'm about to land with that increased jolt from the wind. So it's definitely, I could feel I was definitely going a lot faster. And from 150 feet, it's about 5 seconds before you'll touch down and land. So at this point, when I get hit, I'm kind of shaking and I'm trying to gathering myself back up and go, okay, what am I going to do? And really the choices are, one, try to turn. And one of the biggest reasons for deaths among skydivers, and you have about 20 to 25 deaths a year about 3.2 million skydives a year. So just to give people an idea of how many people pass from skydiving. So, but one of the biggest reasons why people die is they call low turns, meaning you're too close to the ground and you making some kind of turning maneuver. And a turning maneuver is you have two handles above your head, and you pull right or left if you want to turn right or left, and that collapses the outside of the parachute a little bit, and that causes your parachute to dive towards the ground, and that creates a turn. Now, if you're 2,000 feet off the ground and you make that turn and you lose 200 feet, well, no big deal because you're still 1,800 feet off the ground. But if you do that at 150 feet, you're probably diving your parachute directly in the ground, and you're probably not going to live when you hit the ground. So the first thing that goes through my mind is, okay, don't turn. That's going to turn out badly, right? Because that your first thing you want to do is turn because you're like, well, that'll get me out of danger. But no, that'll put you in extra danger. So I go, okay, don't turn. That's going to turn out badly. You've been trained not to do that. Do not do that. And you have 5 seconds, and 5 seconds goes pretty quickly. But within those 5 seconds, you're going lower to the ground. And the reality is, I had no idea if I was going to hit the fence or land before the fence or not because it's going to be close. So I'm counting down the seconds, like 4 seconds. I'm like, well, maybe I'll land before that, maybe not. And as I get down to 1 second, I'm just like, I'm carrying way too much speed. I'm going to hit that fence at, whatever it was, 30 some miles an hour. And there's no way to stop at this point. There's nothing you can do that'll make it better, only worse. And with 1 second left, I'm like, life's about to change. And whack, I go hit the fence, and the fence comes like hits the top of my chest and my stomach, and it stretches out immediately and snaps. So there was some give to it, but I was coming with such force, it just like it quickly caught and boom, I got to feel it come off. And then behind it was that airplane hangar, which is metal building, and that's like 10 feet behind it. So it was almost like instantaneous. Hit the fence, feel it break, and then boom, hit the side of hit the side of the airplane hangar.
Holy cow.
Yeah, it was a big impact for sure.
All right. So what happened next?
So at first I thought I said, and this was my recollection way later, was I thought I said I'm okay, but I would have been saying it to myself because there was no one around in the immediate, 100 yards away, 200 yards away. There were some people, but not that close. So I don't know if I actually said that or not, but what I definitely did say, and this was confirmed by the people that were first on the scene, I was laying there. So when I hit the building, I black out because I'm sure because of the traumatic injuries I hit, my body just shut down. So I'm laying on the ground. First people that come up to me start talking to me, and I find this out months later. What I said was, don't call anybody. I'll be okay. Just give me a minute. Um, and I think my body was really in fight or flight mode, where it was, my body was in horrible shape. I was near death, but it was like, okay, you better fight back for whatever is wrong with me because you don't know what's wrong with you. So I think that it was kind of programmed into my body from years of, doing things such as, climbing rocks, ice mountains, and being in some bad situations where you just go, all right, something's bad's happening right now. You got to get through it because there's no other choice. You'll die if you don't keep going. So I think I programmed that kind of into myself. It's like you train yourself. Going through hard things prepares you for one thing, and that's going through more hard things. So I think my body understood, like, you're in a bad situation. You better fight or you're going to die. And I think that kind of came out in the language that came out of my mouth because I didn't consciously say that. And I had no idea I said that. And someone came into the hospital, at one point, one of my friends, and she told me I said that. I said, did I really say that? And she goes, yeah, that's what they told me you said. She wasn't on the scene, but she had talked to the people that were first on the scene. And then months later, when I went back and visited at the skydiving company, I talked to the people that were first on the scene. I said, did I really say that? They're like, yeah, you did. So it was like, apparently it was true. But I truly think that was my body just reacting and going, you better fight. And I went straight into life or death mode, fight or flight mode, and luckily was kept on fighting and got through it.
So you had some type of a near death experience as a result of this. How
Yeah.
did that happen?
Yeah. Well, as far as, kind of leading into that is really the injuries, because what happened was when I hit that building, I hit it so hard on my left side, so I must have turned a little bit when I went from the fence to the building. And on my left side, so I hit against my ribs, 10 of my 12 ribs break, and it hits so violently into my heart. My heart shoots out of what it normally sits in, called the pericardial sac. It breaks out of the sac, ends up on the right side of my chest, all twisted up. So they flight for life me to the nearest level 1 trauma center that takes care of the worst types of accidents. And the doctors later tell my family, we've never done this surgery on anyone's heart before because no one ever makes it alive. Because when your heart moves that far across your chest, people just die instantly. Because the same thing can happen in a car accident or any kind of blunt force trauma type of accident. So the doctor said, I knew what it looked like and how to fix it from my medical textbooks, but no doctor here had ever tried it before because people, they're dead on arrival when they come in. So, so that leads me into, so the helicopter ride, I remember hearing the rotor blades for a really short second. So I guess I gained consciousness for a really short time. And then it was from the helicopter to immediate surgery, but I was out during that point. I wasn't conscious at all. And they had to move the heart because if they didn't fix that, I was going to die. So at that point, they put me into a coma and to protect me from all my injuries. They don't want me to accidentally move or anything like that. So they fixed the heart. And for the next 8 days, I'm intubated in a coma. So in that coma, it's hundreds and hundreds of nightmares in that near-death experience. I guess they call it a distressing near-death experience. It wasn't one of those pleasant ones where they're just like, "Come back, you're wonderful." It was more like we want you. No one cares about you. We're leaving you for dead. Too bad. And that's where a lot of those nightmares were. And we're talking about it's the odd thing is like there's no space time or like consciousness in that where you go, do these hundreds of dreams happen within like 1 minute or they happen over the 8 days? My thought is it happened more over the 8 days because it was a journey through those 8 days, but there's no way for me to confirm it one way or another. And they really started out kind of more passive. So one of the first ones I remember, and I'm not a person that remembers dreams or nightmares in normal everyday life, but these are, I mean, etched into my memory and I can recall them like, really easily. And the one thing I say about nightmares is that when you're in a coma, normally if you're in everyday life, something horrific happens in your nightmare, you wake up and you could shake it off and say that's not real. But when you're in a coma, there's no waking up. So it's just like one after the other and it becomes your reality because there is no other reality outside of where you are at that time. So you could very easily start believing these things, and that's part of the journey too. But like for instance, the first one I remember was there was like two medical staff and they're holding me like a sideways log, like kind of in their arms like this, and they're walking, and I'm in a hospital gown, and they're walking me out to the desert, and then they just kind of put me down on the ground and I'm in a sheet and I'm laying there and I'm completely broken and I can't move. So I'm kind of just, laying there and unable to move. And they say to me, they said, you know, we can't help you, sorry. And they just turn around and walk back. And you're kind of laying in the middle of the desert in the middle of nowhere and just like, what do you mean what do you mean you're leaving? And you're not helping me. And you're kind of in shock. You're just like, well, what did I do so terrible that I deserve that? And really going through these nightmares too, it was a battle of the mind going, I can't believe all of these people don't care about me and don't want me to live and don't want to help me. Because the reality is on the outside, all these people were helping me. They're putting me back together. They are fixing my heart. They're fixing all because I broke 20 bones total. And besides the heart, it was 3 other organs they had to fix during that coma. So, but if all you see is the negativity of all these nightmares, it's easy to buy into that and believe it because it's almost giving me an easy way out going, if you just let go of this and let yourself die, you don't have to deal with the pain. You don't have to deal with the unknown because the unknown was when I hit the building, I didn't know what injuries I had. So was I paralyzed? Did I have brain injury? Could I ever come back from these injuries? All that was unknown. All I knew in the coma was I was in really bad shape, and I knew there was an accident that happened, and that was it. And I was kind of always in a fetal position or just laying there unable to move position, which really was the exact same position I was in that hospital bed, unable to move. So all these nightmares, I couldn't actively do anything other than lay there and I couldn't really do anything for myself. So I was at the mercy of these people that were in this dream with me because I couldn't do anything myself. So it was a continuous battle of, do I really believe this is real life and people don't care about me and rather let me die? So I had to decide, not knowing what the future was or what was possible, could I recovery? I had to decide now whether I wanted to live or not because it was just as easy to not live. And it was almost like no one's it's okay to let yourself go, that no one's going to know if you gave up during that time because you're in this coma. So it was kind of the easy way out. If I wanted the easy way out, if I chose to go the easy route or go the hard route and go, I'm going to battle this and get through this and figure it out and try to live.
So, Jason, I'm curious, who was telling you that you had to make this choice? Was it just a knowing, or was there some being, person, entity saying you've got to make this choice?
Right. Well, there was no voice that was saying I have to make that choice. I consciously knew there was a choice. And the way I look at it is, and I'm Christian, and that my beliefs are, my Lord and Savior Jesus. And it's almost like I learned all of the lessons I needed to learn to overcome what I call a temptation to give in and let yourself die. And, it's like years before I ever got into this accident, you know, God put people in my life to teach me all the lessons I need to learn to survive. And all I had to do was put those things into action, which wasn't easy by any means, but I had direction on what I needed to do. So I saw the nightmare as really as temptation, and look at from a biblical sense of you're not going to be tempted beyond what you can bear and there's a way out. So I believe that all these temptations were trying to take me away from what I was supposed to be doing, and it was showing me an easy way if I wanted to get out of that. But the reality is I was like, going into that accident when I wasn't happy and working too many hours, it was like I'm made for more than what I'm doing now, and I need to figure this out. And I believe that I was on this earth for more than I was doing before that accident. And battling through that, it was a conscious choice to say I wasn't happy, and if I want to let go now, I can. Or you're going to push through, it's going to be much harder, but on the other side, if you get through this, you have to prove that you were made for more, and make good on what you said, and get through this and come out on the other side, and do things you weren't doing beforehand.
Okay. So, what perspective were these coming from, these dreams? Were you, and it was coming through your eyes and you see everybody else, or were you seeing it from a higher perspective where you're looking down on the scene and you're seeing you from a different vantage point?
Yeah. No, I was me, and it was coming directly from me. That was the point of view. Yeah, it was almost it took me a long time to think of it this way, in that it was almost like all these dreams. So they started after some sort of accident happened, and it was never a skydiving accident, but something bad happened, and people were really angry at me or in these dreams, and I couldn't figure out why, because I was like, well, I don't know what I did. So for instance, at one point I was on one of those double decker buses you would see in Great Britain, and we're like turned on its side, and you're hanging from the seatbelt, and people are injured, and they're looking at me, and I'm in the back. It's not like I was driving, and people are staring at me and yelling at me like I had done something. So it's always after an accident, and people aren't happy with me for so it was mirrored the fact that it wasn't the skydiving accident, but there's some sort of accident and people weren't happy with whatever had happened, and for some reason I was to blame for whatever happened, where it didn't seem like I was the one who created this in terms of all these accidents and all these nightmares, but people were blaming me for it.
Okay, so that's really interesting. You're in this coma. Are you in ICU?
Yeah.
Okay, so you're in this coma in ICU. And from what I understand about ICU, sometimes it's limited to only family visiting. Usually it's limited to the number of people who can come and see you and the number of people who can come and see you on a particular day. Did all that apply back in 2018?
So well, this is before COVID. So
Yes, I know.
I know that, to be honest, I don't know any of that. I mean, my parents were definitely there, and my friend, who was my emergency contact and was the first person that heard of the accident and got called.
Specific, I'm asking for a really specific reason.
Mm,
You said that what was happening is every time you're having one of these dreams, your perspective is that you've been in some type of an accident. So you gave the bus example, and now people are mad at you. So I was curious, and you may not even know the answer to this question, but I'm wondering if you were picking up on energy outside of yourself from the people surrounding you, because some of them were mad because you're in this accident, like maybe your mom, because of the how you're in this accident. And I'm wondering if some of that energy or even words were being projected that you were picking up and pulling into that dream. And that's why you were having that specific type of dream. Do you have any idea? Have you ever asked anybody about the feelings that they had or things that they said to you while you were in that coma?
No, I think it was self-judgment of all these
Okay, that
accidents.
makes a lot of sense.
I think I was not happy and, people were helping me and I felt maybe undeserving of the help that I was receiving because even, later on when I'm doing physical therapy and things like that, people would, one of my therapists was helping me and she's like, I wasn't really sure to how to treat you because you had so many injuries. So I would go home and start reading my book from physical therapy school and then come back and I was overwhelmed by that because I'm like, she cared so much. She's here for 12 hours a day. She went home and read her books to figure out how to treat me and came back just for me. And I was just like, I don't, I, you're just like, I can't believe how dedicated all these folks are. And sometimes you don't feel like you deserve how well it is. But no, I don't. And I'll tell you why I don't think the negative energy from the outside was any part of it. So the first thing that happened when my parents arrived. So my parents lived on the East Coast. This happened in Denver. Well, it happened north of Denver, but I was in a hospital near Denver. And so my parents come in. They had to fly out right away when they got the call that your son might not live. And so they walk into the room, and I'm completely out in the coma. And I have this picture where my mom took a picture of me when she walked in the room. And months later, I didn't realize it even existed until she told me. But she told me she took a picture because if I didn't live, she wanted to have one last picture of me. Because even those early days, I weren't sure I was going to survive. And then she walked up to the bed and then she picked up my hand and she said, Jason, it's mom, I'm here. And I squeezed her hand. Now, I have no recollection of squeezing her hand. I was way down deep in that coma fighting for my life. But it was like a sign that went out to my parents that that somewhere deep down I'm still there and I'm fighting and it's going to be okay. So, and even there was never ever any anger towards me with the accident because my family made sure they came over and when I was consciously and kind of thinking straight and they'd said, you know, they asked me, what happened? And I told them what happened. They're like, we don't blame you for any of this. It's like it's an accident, wind blew, there was never any anger, towards and like I said, my friend that was first on the scene, she was happy I was alive, and she was, as she tells the story to me, the nurses that would come in the ICU, they're always interested to see what the person actually looks like when they're not laying in a pile of mess in a coma. So she would like, bring up social media and look at. She was like, here, he races in triathlons, and he, besides jumping out of the plane, he climbs mountains, and here's pictures and things like that. So no, I think there was good energy outside of the coma. Because one of the things I really struggled through as well, and that's why I kind of say I think it was me judging myself in that coma, was the guilt I felt for the accident. Because the reality of it is, you could say, well, the wind knocked me off and that's what happened. And if I wasn't jumping out of that plane and putting myself in that situation all those hundred of times, that would have never happened. Now, for me, it was the best thing that ever happened to me. Now, for my family, that's a different story. And when I'm laying there, because there was about 10 weeks where I couldn't move essentially after I wake up from the coma. And I went through tremendous guilt. And my family was never putting that on me at all. But I felt terrible because I'm like, I can't even fathom what it must feel like. Well, first of all, with the parents' love they have for you as a child, and for them to get a call that says your son might not live, you need to get out to Denver right away, or what it must have been like when he called my siblings and said your brother might not live. We don't know, or them walking in and seeing me in that coma, because that picture is pretty horrifying that my mom took. So I put them through that. So you almost can separate it from, I think it's the best thing that happened for me. I wish if I could take anything away, I wish I didn't have to put my family through what happened because I feel
I
terrible about that.
understand all that, but what I'll also say is that I know that this is a sport that has an element of danger to it, but we do something even more dangerous. Almost everybody who's listening to this does something more dangerous every single day. They get in a car and they drive somewhere because statistically, there's almost nothing that we do that's more dangerous than driving in a car. So you could say that, and I understand where you're coming from, but we all, whether we're aware of it or not, are doing things that are dangerous every single day.
Yeah, but there's a difference between danger and then when it actually goes wrong, and then you have to go, oh. And
Yeah.
the thing is, when you're laying in that bed, there's I'd say coping mechanisms get taken away. So my coping mechanism for not being happy, right? I'd go for a run and get an endorphin rush, or really jumping out of that plane all those times was a coping mechanism because I wasn't happy in other parts of my life. So when they take that away, it makes you lay in the bed and go, you're going to deal with your life, and there's no hiding from it. There's pain and getting through that part and surviving, but once you kind of are a little further along, it's there's no escaping it. You can't. I couldn't walk. I couldn't move. I just had to lay there, and it was the hardest thing I ever went through, but it was the best thing I ever went through because it made me really look at my life and go, "You got a second chance. Not everybody gets a second chance, and you could be better from this, and lots of good can come out of this if you make it that way." So so yeah, that was a tough time, but yeah, laying there was I felt pretty guilty. But I would say too that but one of the amazing things is so so I was in the hospital about 105 days or so, and after it kind of got out of the hospital and before my parents were going back to the East Coast, and I said, Mom, I said, if we're looking for silver linings in this for us, I was like, we spent 105 days together. Of course, 8 of it I was in a coma, but it's okay, minus 8 days. I was like, how many trips it would have taken me to go visit you guys to accumulate 105 days, to be together. And, as my parents age and my mom, passed away about 2 years ago at this point, but I got to spend 105 days with her well, I didn't know was near to the end of her life, but it happened to be that I got to spend, 105 days talking to them and being with them. And that was one of the, more amazing things about the whole accident. So I'm super thankful for that as well.
Oh, well, I'm sorry for the loss of your mom, but I'm also grateful that you got that. And think about it, wasn't even just spending time, it was spending very focused time with no distractions because you weren't in a place with a bunch of distractions like you would be sitting at a restaurant or sitting on the beach somewhere or going to a movie or any other of the things that we do normally as interactions when we get together with people. So you had these things and you were calling them dreams. So, do you think that you actually had a near death experience because these dreams don't sound like a normal dream? I mean, to your point, most of the dream is lost within 5 minutes of waking. And even the people who have conditioned themselves to remember their dreams have to write them down. And they become foggy and not as clear over time. And it sounds like these are very crystal clear. You mentioned that you could recall them. So, do you want to share a couple more of the ones that you had and then tell us why you think you would call them dreams? Or do you think you actually had what we would call a near death experience where you left your body and had these experiences?
Right. So another one would be so I'm laying in a backyard and I'm injured, can't move, just laying there completely, how I got there, I have no idea. And there's like a father and there's a son, maybe 12 years old or so, the son. And they're standing maybe 20 feet away and they're having a barbecue and they're really mad that I'm in their backyard and why I was there and how I was hassling them. And the young boy looks at me and he looks at his dad and he goes, why don't they just let him die? And then he was just like, that was, it's like from an innocent young boy coming something so angry and malicious really disturbed me and got to me that they said, and they just kind of just turned around and went back to their barbecue after saying that. And another one was, so we're in a trolley car and, multiple cars and it stopped. It's dark outside and I'm kind of sitting there and something terrible happened. Like I didn't know what the terrible thing was or why this was stopped. Because it was like permanently stopped. So we're there for, a long period of time. And there's a person sitting behind me and they say, well, you can't go anywhere. You can't move. The police are on their way. And I was like, police are on their way. And I had no idea what had to do with me. And then behind that was somebody that's screaming that they want to kill me, some man. And I couldn't turn around to see who it was or what the problem was or anything. I just kind of had to sit there straight. And it was just like going on for hours that they were coming to kill me and they want to end my life. And that, went on for a long time. Another one was, so like they have these tourist trains in Colorado where I'm from where they kind of tour the mountains, or Santa Claus is, little kids for Santa. And they're kind of these open cars. And so I'm laying there unable to move, and these like two conductors pick me up and then bring me onto this train and sit me down and kind of face me out towards the open window, car window. And they explained to me that anyone who wants to can kill me at any point that I'm on the train, and there's no repercussions for killing me. And you're just like, I'm not sure I did anything that bad that, well, I don't and like I said, it starts and I don't know anything that a horrible thing that I did, but apparently something horrible. And so the train starts, and at first you're kind of in fear of like someone can shoot me if they want to. And then this was one of the last stream, or the last stream. And then I kind of just got, I just kind of fear went away, and I kind of looked up for the first time and looked around. I said, if you're going to kill me now, because if you're not going to kill me now, you don't have a chance later, because I'm coming back from all this. So I'm coming back strong. And I said, can you hear me? And I'm looking around, and then the dream ends. And then the next thing I remember is opening my eyes to see the sun coming through my window, and then a doctor looking down at me and telling me I'm lucky to be alive. So, so yeah, the it was all temptation and a battle to see if I wanted to continue on and live life, or you know let go and take the easy way out and let myself die. And that was the whole theme, and that was the whole thing. And in the end, as it kind of progressed, it went from the passive easy thing where people are leaving me out in the desert to they're actively trying to end my life. In each one you're kind of battling through the next, and you're getting all this bad news, and it's like, do you want to keep going? And it's like, yep, keep going. And it's like the going forward, or into the unknown, was the hard part. And the easy part would be if I wanted to give up, and I didn't want to give up, and I wanted to get through this to do something better on the other side. I knew there was light ahead, because it was really dark in all these dreams, and there was you never see a sunshine or anything like that. And it's like battling through the darkness to get back to the light. It's almost like when eagles are the only birds that fly into storms, because on the other side of the storm is the sunlight and the calmness, and they use the turbulent air to keep on moving up and bumping up to get out of the storm. So it was almost like, you'd want to compare it to that. It was just like the nightmares were just turbulence, and the difficult part that I had to keep on climbing over to get out to the other side. So yeah, that's the way I kind of look at it now.
Okay, so you referred to this as a hellish experience. That was one of the words you used. And I also understand your explanation that this is almost like a I'm going to call it a test because I just don't know what other word to use, like a test for yourself to see if you could come through and get and gather the strength to make the decision to not, as you said, take the easy way out and to go through this and fight. And the moment that you decided to fight, you came back. And what this reminds me of, so people often comment when some of these people have really extremely positive near death experiences. Sometimes I get things in the comment about, well, what about the hellish ones? Like you're only focusing on the ones. And so this is one of the hellish ones. Now, I want to remind people that in the studies of near death experiences, not by me, but by several other people, that when they statistically analyze the more positive, euphoric, love based experiences versus the ones that people have labeled as hellish, they only make up about 6% of all near death experiences. They're very uncommon. And the assessment by the people validating and studying these are usually that the person experiences what they expect to experience. But in the beginning, you mentioned that you are a Christian and that you have Jesus as your savior. And so that would, according to that religious doctrine, save you from going to any place other than heaven. So, what do you think about the fact that you had this hellish experience when you had this belief system that you were already what the Christians would call saved and you wouldn't go to a hellish place. So that kind of blows up that would you have, unless maybe before that you were expecting that you wouldn't go to heaven, which doesn't make a lot of sense. So, will you talk to this? Because I know this is something that people grapple with in the comments on my videos all the time.
Sure. Well, there's something in the Bible that talks about trials or difficult times you go through in life, and the Bible tell you, it's not every just because you're saved doesn't mean that life is going to be easy. And the tough things you go through, when they say they test your faith and they help you develop perseverance. So you could think of it as it does it test your faith? Do you still believe all the lessons you have learned or not? And so if the whole point of that, all those nightmares was to try to weaken me and test my faith and see if I was really a believer or not, and take me down if I wasn't really truly faithful and truly believe that God had a plan for my life, well then it would have taken me down and I would have gave up. But it really strengthened my faith instead of deteriorating my faith. So I don't look at it as like getting sent to hell. That's not the way I view it. It's you're going through a difficult time and this is, are you going to get through it or not? and
More like
and
a tribulation then or something.
yeah, I don't believe it as being sent to hell. Oh.
Okay, that's a good differentiation. But the one thing that your experience has in common with other people that I've heard, and a couple of them have been on that I've interviewed personally, is that when they have this more, I'm going to call it a hellish experience because that was the word that you used for it in the beginning. When they got to this certain point and they said, I don't believe in this, is there something more, or called on God or called on Jesus, they were immediately taken out of it and shown a heavenly realm or something. But for you, it was almost like you called on yourself and your own inner strength, and boom, were able to overcome because you stood up and said, fine, you're going to do it. Come and get me because I'm coming back stronger. And then you're out of it and you're awake. So it's almost like you bested that situation, which is very similar to other NDEs that have had those experiences. You want to speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, I would say you never do anything completely by yourself.
Well, there is
And
no separation, I don't think, between us and God. So, yeah, I suppose that's
right.
correct. Yeah.
So I think so before the accident, the one thing, so one day I had a prayer and I said, I'm kind of lost and I'm not happy with what I'm doing. And, I'm meant for more. And I was like, I've been trying to do it my way for too long and it's not working. I said, if you will lead me, I'll follow. And then 3 weeks later is when I smashed into the side of that building. So there was that guiding force the whole time to get through it. So it was yeah, I was what I believe is I was led the whole way, and it's not a we all have free will as well. So at any point could I choose to go in a different direction than I did? The answer is yes. So it's both a free will choice and it's faith. So I think it's both of those things when you're going through
Okay.
that.
No, that makes a lot
So
of sense.
and when I said about temptation, is that you don't you're not going to be overcome by temptation and there's a way out. So there was also a belief that on the other side of all these temptations and trials that I was going through, if I could overcome them, there'd be a way out on the end. So there was a fight
Right.
and battle
Which
towards
there
that.
was because you opened your eyes, which is amazing.
There there
Do
was.
you have any idea like what percentage of chance of survival that they gave you while you were in that situation?
I never asked to what that was because the heart doctor that fixed when I opened my eyes I saw him. It's they don't come and see you all the time, so they're looking at your charts, I guess, and you're unaware at the time when you're kind of out of it a lot. So it's not like a regular surgery. Like I've gone for surgeries afterwards where I could ask like, well, what's the percentage increase I'm going to get from this surgery after you fix my arm or something like that? Because you're consciously there and you're thinking about it. When you're in this accident, you're like you went from not knowing anything was going to go wrong with that day, and all of a sudden there's lots of things wrong with you, and you don't even know what the things are wrong with you. So I didn't even know what to ask when I woke up to even say, well, what's him saying you're lucky to be alive, and the first word spoke to me when I woke up was enough to say, okay, this is a pretty serious situation. So I've kind of looked to try to find things about it's called pericardial tear that I went through to try to figure that out. I mean, there's like medical journals and things you can kind of sift through. But I mean, I haven't spent tons of time doing that. But from what they told me, the chance of survival is really low. But I couldn't give a percentage. They never gave that to me.
Yeah, I was just curious. So you've mentioned several times that this experience completely changed you in the way that you feel like it's the best thing that happened to you. So will you elaborate on that and share with everybody why you think that this is the best thing that happened to you? Because I don't think a lot of people watching would be like, yeah, I want to do an accident like this is the best thing.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the things that is, I think a lot of times you're speeding through life at speed, you're getting tugged in all these different directions, and you're not if you were asked what's the most important in your life, you would say it, but are you honoring that and really being in the present, right? Like skydiving is complete, you're in the present completely, but are you living those same lessons when you're outside of skydiving, right? Because how many times you see people that are, let's say, at a restaurant and going to dinner, they're all on their phones and they're with people, but they're really not with people. Or you're in a room with other people and, that are in long-term relationships and they're kind of not really there. They're in physically there, but they're not in it and really listening to each other. And it's really you get a limited amount of time with people and taking advantage of that. And two, it's really honoring that time with them, being focused on what they are. And I think one of the things also was really being thankful. There were lots of times I'd go through life. I was thankful and I would think of that person in my head, but I would never express it. So when I woke up from that call, I was like, you know what? There's so many people that wouldn't have known how important they are to me because I just never verbally expressed it. And I think one of the things that changed after that was, and how you do it is it comes with practice because I don't naturally do it, is to translate what is in your heart and in your head about people and actually go out and say that to them. If you had an amazing time with somebody, like, I went to coffee with my friend the other day I hadn't seen in a long time, and it was going, I had an amazing time. Thank you so much for spending time with you. And then it's sending him a text later and saying, here are the three things that you said to me today that made a hugest difference in my life. I wouldn't have said that before. They wouldn't have known that how important they were and then I'm like, you have to say these things because you didn't before and you regret not saying those things because I could have died and people wouldn't have known, like, how do you feel about me? And maybe that's my judgment on myself and maybe don't people don't think that, but I have to live in a way that I think is honoring those people that I care about in a way that maybe I didn't before.
That's
Uh,
wonderful. That sounds amazing. So it sounds like your relationships really changed after this experience too.
for sure, and I think yeah, it's putting it into action of talking to some a couple weeks ago I was talking to a friend on the phone and their voice just didn't sound right for them. And I'm just like, something seems wrong with them, but I don't know, and they're not volunteering it. And then, we kind of hung up and I kept on thinking about it over. And I was like, and I texted them later and was like, was something wrong? Are you okay? Is something wrong? Your voice didn't sound right. And I think before I would have just been speeding along at life on to the next thing, on to the next thing. I wouldn't have thought about that. And I think I'm just more maybe things I perceive before I'm more exploring, like taking an extra step because maybe that person doesn't want to volunteer what they're going through. And you have to push them a little bit and say, are you sure you're okay? And giving more of an opportunity that you can understand. You think that something's not quite right that with them, and you want to make sure they're really okay. So
Yeah, that's so nice. So you've explained a lot of these things from your perspective of what they did for you. One of the reasons I love to do these interviews and have these conversations is because for the people watching, they're probably not going to have a near, hopefully, you guys are not going to have a near death experience, but you can take away these little nuggets of knowledge from the people who have had these experiences. So, Jason, would you mind maybe giving the audience a few things summed up that you feel like you didn't know before that you know now, like on a level of importance in your life?
yeah, well, I think there's lots of times I think negativity can really take over because we have see so many negative things all the time in this world, right? You turn on the TV, you turn on the news. You know, a- along my journey, doctors and physical therapists and people like that kept on saying that I would say, I'm going to do this. And they go, that's not possible. And I would go, what do you mean it's not possible? It was like they want to stop you. And a lot of times doctors, and I had amazing doctors. So I'm not saying that I didn't have amazing doctors, but they only spend 5 minutes with you and they'll make a prediction, right? There's a million outcomes that happen from all the surgeries they do. And I always just kind of said, well, I'm going in this direction. I know I can get there, and I'm not going to let anybody stop me. I'll figure out where the failure is. If I fall on my face, I fall on my face. But if I allow other people to control my outcome before I even try to go on that journey, then like I'm going to regret that 10 years later if I go, well, maybe if I just did this, or maybe if I trained harder, or maybe if I did more rehabilitation, or whatever the case may be, then I'd be further along. But I didn't, because someone told me I couldn't do it. And now I'm here and I'm miserable. And I was just like, you know what? I'm going to go as hard as I can and I'll find failure. And then maybe after 5 or 6 years, if they said I couldn't do something, I figure it out myself. But the things they said, like, for instance, they were like, you're probably never going to run again. And the reality is, you're like, your bones are too broken. This is one of the guys who are the doctors who had done surgery on me. And I was like, well, my goal is to do a triathlon again. And so I ignored what he said and kept on going. And I was like, figure this out myself. And one day short of the 1 year anniversary, I did a triathlon. So people always have lots of opinions. And oftentimes the people who have the strongest opinions are people that aren't invested in your life. So keep pushing forward. If you really want to do something, go out and figure it out. You might fail, but if you don't, or if you're not willing to fail, you're not going to be able to succeed. So it's, there's not always the rainbow outcome that you're going to get to every goal. But you know what? If you give everything you want and you fail, it's like, you gave everything you possibly could to it. And then sometimes it's just not going to work out. So also, like, testing yourself is a huge thing too. I think all along the way, I was like, I always hated, people would always ask you, like, are you okay? And you're like, well, I woke up in the morning, I was grumpy. In the afternoon, maybe I was a little happier. So it depends what time of the day you ask me. I was just like, I want some concrete answer to that I could give someone, like, are you okay or not? So all along the way, whether I was going to fail or not, is I would set up tests for myself to see how I was progressing. Now, sometimes I did fail and I had to adjust what I was doing. And sometimes I would exceed it and go, keep on doing the same thing. But you had to have to have the courage to be able to fail if you're going to get through it. It's like, because you don't know where you are unless you're willing to fail. And it's not complete failure. It's just like, okay, now we got to move in this other direction to get where we want. I think that's a big thing. Overcoming fear. Fear oftentimes could do two things. It could protect you, and you would say, maybe don't jump out of the airplane. That was fear trying to protect you. But I'll say 326 times it went pretty well. The 327 was not as well, or it was best thing that ever happened to me. But also it can protect you, but it also can keep you from doing things that you're unsure that you can do. And as you get closer to danger, sometimes it's harder to figure out which one it is pulling you. But growth and getting better is going to be uncomfortable. It's not going to feel good. But that's when you start getting better, when you push yourself to an uncomfortable level to get to wherever you want to go. If it's easy, it's not usually not worth it. So, and I'm a big believer in building your foundation. Now, what that really means is, when I say, getting through doing hard things prepares you to do other hard things. It's like a deposit in a bank that you can pull out when you need it. If you're in a situation to say, you know what, I'm not whatever you think you lack. Well, how do you build that? Figure out a way to do hard things to build yourself up to whatever you think you're lacking. It's finding something purposely is not comfortable for you to get through. So let's say you weren't a runner and you hate running. Well, maybe it's just do a 5K just because you hate it, but proving it to yourself you can get through a 5K helps you in other parts of your life. It wasn't comfortable. I didn't even like it. I didn't know what I was doing going in. I learned it and I got through it. Now I can do other things in other parts of my life that aren't comfortable. It wasn't comfortable at first when I was telling people all my feelings about how I felt about them. That wasn't a comfortable place for me. I didn't necessarily like doing it at first. I was just like, you feel really vulnerable. You're usually like the person that talk about their emotions doesn't, you wouldn't see a tear coming from my eye ever. And I could probably have counted in the 15 years before the accident how many times there was a tear that rolled down my eyes. And I could tell you that a tear rolled down my eyes Sunday. And when I was telling somebody about the accident and telling them, really, it wasn't even out of the accident. It was about growing from it, and what it helped me do and how it helped me change my life. You know, I wouldn't have ever let a tear come down my eye in public before that. It's like it's not comfortable. It's not. It's like and I was like, but you're not going to get better at that unless you allow yourself to be uncomfortable and go through that. Oh, did that really happen? Did I just cry in the middle in front of people, or or my voice is shaking because I was talking about something I was going through and it was like cracking, and I was like that wouldn't have happened before, and sometimes it's still uncomfortable to do it sometimes, but it's like if I could if telling my story and telling the things I went through helps someone else in some way, well then I guess I'll break down and a tear will come down my eye, and whatever it is, if it helps someone else, because that's in the end of the day what I missed out on before, and it's like what can I do, is really the mission is to help other people going through their toughest time in their lives and helping them get it through it, because I think oftentimes we don't give ourselves enough credit for the strength we have inside to get through difficult things. It's so easy to give someone else credit for how strong they are, but it's like, no, you're just as strong. You have to give yourself credit for it. You've built your life, especially the older you get, through a lot of tough things in life, and give yourself credit for getting through things. And you got through all those other things. Why can't you get through this next tough thing? So I think that's a huge thing as well.
Wow, those were so many inspiring things. I'm so glad that you shared all of those with everybody watching. I think that is absolutely amazing. And I can see why you say that this was the best thing that happened to you, because I can see how deeply this has touched you. So, the people that are watching, I know you've got your book on the wall behind you. Why don't you tell everybody, the other way, why don't you tell everybody where they can find you, where they can find your book, and how they can connect with you?
Sure. My book's called 8 Days Till Sunrise. And there's lots of other things we haven't talked about and lots of other lessons learned along the way that are really, relatable to everyone's life. It's you don't have to be a skydiver to understand the lessons, because they're lessons about everyone's life. The way I came through me was skydiving and through the hospital, but they're all lessons that anybody can appreciate and anybody can go through. So it's available at my website, jasondennen.com. Last name is Denen, on Amazon, Barnes and Noble .com. And yeah, you look at me, I speak a lot, anywhere from churches to universities to professional organizations. So if you're interested in, come to have me speak about all those other things I learned and how it can help other people in their lives, just go to my website and reach out, and I'm happy to respond and talk to you about the possibility of coming and speaking.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, Jason, I want to tell you how much I admire your positivity, how much I admire your perseverance. And if I could make a t shirt for you, it would be going through hard things prepares you for going through more hard things. That should definitely be your t shirts. So, thank you so much for what you are doing to help wake up the collective consciousness and help empower people. It's really what my channel is about. Help people understand that they are so powerful and they can do so much more than they know that they can do. So thank you for sharing all of your inspiring messages today.
No, thank you so much for having me on. I greatly appreciate it.
Yeah, and thank you everybody for watching. Next up, check out this playlist of other NDE interviews. Please like and subscribe. It really helps this channel to grow so I can bring you more content. Thank you for watching. I'm so glad you're here.